My name is Dumelo Setlolo Samathomo. Good morning to you. Morning, partner.
Morning. My name is Gareth Edwards. Welcome to your moment of truth. It's what we've been leading up to all these weeks, all these months. It is finally here as I look out the windows of Studio 1 here in Johannesburg. No umbrellas, it looks like in Joburg for you, but maybe in other parts of the country. We'll check in with the weather service a little bit later as well for you.
Quite important that is. Of course, the big day is officially here, and South Africans are expected to get ready to cast their ballots for a political party or an independent candidate of their choice to, of course, run the local municipal elections.
Yeah, reporters fanning out across the country throughout this morning and throughout today as the updates continue to come in as we all get ready to make our mark. Just a quick reminder, by the way, you may have heard this, because I see you holding your pen.
Right.
The IEC asking, if possible, for you to please bring your own pen with you. Now, normally we wouldn't ask that, but because of COVID-19, there's a call for you to bring a black ink pen. Keep it on you. We don't want to be sharing pens if we can avoid it. But I think let's start with, first of all, Slindelo Masekane and Dason Tathia for us. Dason in Durban. We'll speak to you, Dason, in a moment. But first...
Yeah, of course. Let's start with Dason. Good morning to you, colleagues. Dason, you are out in KwaZulu-Natal. I mean, just behind you there, I can see what looks like a police nyala. I might be mistaken. But from where you stand, how's it looking? What are we expecting this morning?
But I think I'll start by telling you the story of the weekend, because that was effectively the dry run for today, for the big day. It was where the special votes were being cast, and the KwaZulu-Natal province was dealing with just fewer than 170,000 of those. But if the weekend was anything to go by, I can tell you that authorities and the IEC officials will have their hands full. They're dealing with about 4,900 odd voting stations here in the province. And yes, you are right. That is a police armored vehicle behind me, because this is the Results Operations Center in KwaZulu-Natal. This is part of the deployment that the SAPS has in the province. You'll know that KZN is one of those provinces that has been watched very closely because of the risk associated with this area. I mean, yesterday when the police minister was here visiting some of the hotspots, one of the things that he was saying was that almost half of those hotspots come from KwaZulu-Natal. And the majority of them are here in eThekwini, where I am now. So as a result of that, there were over 18,000 security personnel deployed to keep this place safe. But again, coming back to why I say this weekend was a dry run, is because there were incidents of disruptions that took place on the south in Umzinto. There, the special votes did not continue at all because the community members were protesting over a councillor candidate there. In the west towards Camperdown, that was where there were also disruptions at about 7 voting stations. Also, the SAPS needed there to intervene. So certainly going forward into today, there are police members stationed at all of these voting stations. The high-risk ones have a higher number of police officers. I want you to listen in to what the Provincial Commissioner in KwaZulu-Natal said yesterday, General Nhlanhla Mkwanazi. He was talking about these deployments that I'm mentioning to you now.
In the province of KwaZulu-Natal, out of a total of 4,940 voting stations, there's a total number of 120 high-risk voting stations that have been identified. We have a total of 815 medium-risk voting stations, and there's a total of 4,006 voting stations of low risk. And we are expected to deploy, in terms of the category of those risk profiles, there's a minimum number of deployments that we put in place to assign to those voting stations, and the total number of deployments that we've put aside for that purpose is 11,986, Minister. So those are the total number of members that are going to be deployed at those voting stations. We have also a contingency number of police officers and security forces that are going to be available, that are going to be mending the district warehouses of the IEC, and also those that are going to be available to assist with crowd management situations if they arise, and any other incidents that will require investigation. We'll have dedicated a number of detectives that are deployed for investigating all cases that are involved in relation to these elections. So in total, Minister, we have 18,460 security personnel that are going to be deployed in securing the local government election 2021.
All right, let's go ahead over to Sandelo Masikane now as well. Desan Tathia, thank you for you. We'll come back to you a little bit later. Slee, let's talk about Johannesburg for the moment. Special votes, as we heard, issues down in KZN. Before we talk about the polls opening up in less than 2 hours where you are, what is the latest you've been hearing? How did special votes go? Any issues? And how's it looking for this morning?
Well, certainly, Gareth, we know that this weekend, in terms of these special votes, was the precursor to voting day today. And the special votes had a greater significance this year because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The IEC saying that this particular weekend for special votes was in order to not only give those an opportunity who can't go on voting day, but also to decongest the polls, to ensure that voting day doesn't become a super spreader event. We know that in Gauteng in particular, for the most part, the special votes weekend went on smoothly. There were a couple of areas that experienced some issues in terms of voting stations not opening up due to bad weather conditions, delays in some PPE materials coming through to some of the voting stations in Alexandria in particular. But for the most part, overall, certainly it was a successful weekend in terms of special votes. But we know that, of course, Gauteng is the most contested area in terms of these municipal elections. And if I can just take you through the numbers, Gareth, we know that the over 26 million eligible voters that will be making their way to voting stations today will be electing over 10,000 councillors who are going to take up seats in 257 different municipal councils, which comprise of 8 metropolitan councils, as well as 44 district councils, as well as 205 local councils. We also know that Johannesburg in particular is the most contested municipality with 56 political parties that are on the proportional representation ballot. We also know that today, of course, we are expecting a number of leaders across Gauteng, and in particular 2 former presidents to be casting their ballots today, namely Thabo Mbeki as well as Kgalema Motlanthe. And around 7 a.m. when the polls do open up, we will be following the chairman of the IEC, Glenn Mashinini, who's also expected to cast his vote today.
Yeah, and also just a reminder that we haven't seen certain influential senior, ANC members such as former, President Kgalema Motlanthe. Just as far as campaigning is concerned, we've heard, statements from the likes of former ANC President Thabo Mbeki and the likes. So it will be interesting to see those big names casting their vote this morning. But Jason, coming back to you, I mean, I just listened to what Nhlanhla had to say, the KZN Police Commissioner. It seems security, as you've mentioned before, will be, a big priority today. Also, members of the SANDF, we've heard before, that also be deployed to assist the members of the SAPS in this regard.
Definitely. And remember, in KwaZulu-Natal, I think many of the residents here are suffering from the hangover of the July unrest. So there's a lot of anxiety and a nervousness around that, particularly when it comes to the public infrastructure. You've seen what happened then. So I think here, as a precaution, the SAPS and the other security personnel have taken all of that into account, and they want to ease that anxiety and encourage people to come out and vote today, saying that they have the situation under control. So the SANDF's role here will not be to police the voting stations. They won't be present there at all. Where they will be, though, is on national roads, at the toll plazas, any public facilities, and that's what they will be looking after during this process. But apart from the obvious security concerns and risks of community protests and violence, the IEC is also dealing with other issues here in the province, which hopefully will be resolved or have been resolved. Yesterday, there were 2 incidents that came to our attention. One of them was in Umbumbulu, where a presiding officer there was alleged to have taken marked ballot papers and stuffed them into a box. That is a case that is being investigated, so it's definitely still an allegation for now. And last night, we broke a story of an altercation that took place in Umgababa on the south coast, where some IFP members were alleging that some ANC members were getting a bit too close to some of the IEC officials at a center where ballot boxes were coming in. Also another case that is currently being investigated. We are also waiting for a response from the IEC about how they'll be handling those allegations.
All right, Des and Tathia, for the moment, thank you very much. Lindela Masikana, it seems security not that big an issue. Last question to you, Slee, is not necessarily about security, it's actually about electricity, isn't it? We know that the IEC has been speaking about the power issues, and by some miracle, we're able to keep the lights on, hopefully for today, but there are contingency plans when Tumi and I go stand in the queue later, isn't there?
Well, certainly it will be quite interesting to see if the electricity grid will be able to, hold up for most of the day. We know, of course, that was a major concern last week when the country was plunged into stage 4 load shedding. However, those issues seemingly having been fixed over this weekend to ensure that the power is up and running, particularly for today. But in terms of security, Gareth, we know that Gauteng is also one of those provinces that has been identified as a hotspot, and we know that there will be a deployment of the SANDF in and around those hotspot areas, as well as a large police contingent. We will be trying to see exactly where they'll be located today, but we know in particular Tshwane, areas such as Mamelodi, Mabopane, as well as Atteridgeville have been identified as those hotspots, and hopefully we don't see any signs of protest action, but of course security officials on standby if that kind of a situation does arise.
All right, Lindela Masikane and Jason Tathia, thank you so much for this update this morning. It seems that in as far as 7 o'clock a.m. is concerned, that's time. It still stands for you to start casting your vote today.
That's right. And by the way, if you're on social media, we'd love to hear from you. All you have to do is send us a photo of you maybe in the queue, not inside the election voting centre, please, outside in the queue. Or once you've left, we all get that little, is it indelible ink, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
Maybe send us a photo of that. It'll be lovely to share your experience here on eNCA. Tweet us at eNCA, or you can also post that on Facebook. Just look for eNCA News.